Here we go. What are we talking about this time? Is it going to be another downer episode, Sean? Shall we go
No,
down the
no,
dump?
I've got a question that I've
You got
been
a question.
thinking
Hit,
on, and I wanted
hit,
to
go on. All
approach
right,
you with.
let's go.
So you and I have talked in the past about artists we really kind of enjoyed their work, and they seem to hit a point where they become all business,
All
and
business. Okay.
the sort of there's little attention paid to craft at that point, and it's
Let's
more
name them
about.
by name. That way, there's like a bus that we can throw them under. Let's just point at them and be like, "This guy has become all business, and he's got very little to do with craft now."
Well, I don't want to
It's
say
Dan
little to
Panosian
do
again,
it.
right?
It's Dan. It's always Dan.
It's always Dan.
It's always Dan.
There's a common villain in all of our conversations and stories. It's always going to be Dan Panosian.
But it just got me thinking because lately you and I have become very focused on learning to be better businessmen. But
Yes.
I don't see you taking anything away from your craft in order to do that. And I
Okay.
don't feel my craft is suffering. If anything, I feel like I'm getting better at my craft
Sure.
as I'm doing this.
Sure. I don't always agree, but okay, let's maintain this beautiful lie
About my craft getting better.
about your craft getting better. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
it's just easier to keep the bus going than to jerk left real quick. You know what I mean?
I think you just ended the episode. It's over now.
I thought that was the excuse of why. Oh, he's focusing on business right now. That's probably why it's not as
Right. Well, that's what my question is this. Like,
go.
do you feel that your craft is taking a hit because you're spending more time and energy on like learning to be a better business person and build your business?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's I never thought I'd have to address it because for the longest time, all I'd ever wanted to do was work on. You never think of just establishing a business for yourself, and actually, I'm very regretful that I didn't get started down this path a lot sooner. Like, let's
Me
say
too.
five
Me
years
too.
ago, I wish I had sort of like, hey, I need to take this what do you call it? Need to take this investing in myself a whole lot more serious because I think it would. First of all, I'd have learned it a lot sooner. Second of all, I think 5 years ago, the environment for the kind of successes that we're striving for now was a little bit more rich, a little bit more open.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, that's neither here nor there. But 5 years ago, I wasn't even thinking of that. I was just happy to be like, who's got a job for me,
Right.
and how am I going to excel at that job? It was always at the behest of somebody else, at the availability of which was always at somebody else's control, right?
Right.
And so I never thought about what it meant to take on and put on all of those different hats that's associated in building a business. So you never, if I had any thought about it before, it would be almost dismissive. Like, how hard can it really be? Man, learning what I've learned now, and I'm not saying I know everything, but just based on the limited amount of knowledge that I know, it's like, oh, it's really, really hard, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to run a business and stay on top of your craft and still produce good work, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning of me doing this miniseries, I really, because I wanted to learn, I wanted to know, I really took on as many things as I could because, I want to know what it's like to deal with a printer. I want to know what it's
Right.
like, all of their terminologies, all of their, their scheduling, their cutoffs, the kind of things that I need to be weary about when it comes, or aware about when it comes to paper and paper stock and cover stock and all the different options, right? When it came to like crowdfunding, I wanted to know how all the buttons worked. What are the key things that I need to say during that crowdfunding in order to make people pay attention, and the avenues that are available to me so that there's an awareness thing going on, and all the things that, like, all of those hats, because all of those hats have little micro hats inside of them.
Right.
And you don't put on one and not accidentally put on all the other ones that are associated with it.
Hmm.
So I realized that in the beginning I wasn't really focused on craft, but I was pretty comfortable putting it down, or at the very least I was aware that I was putting craft down because I was, I'm only one person, I only have 24 hours. I need to go invest my time in learning about as much of this stuff as I could.
Right.
And then when I realized, okay, I think I know enough, not to say that I'm an expert at it by any means, to say that I'm a novice is a bit too generous. But the moment I realized, I think I know enough so that I can talk the same language to my printer, I can talk a similar language to a crowd of people, potential backers or whatever. And I focused on those two, but those aren't exclusively it, right? There's many other things that I had to kind of get into. I realized, okay, I need to pick up craft, but I knew as a component of my business, I still needed those things in place. And fortunately, or I needed people who were, I needed those things, those mechanisms in place. And fortunately, I knew enough people to take on those roles on my behalf. I'm also fortunate that I'm in a position in which I can pay those people and not just like, hey, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. I was able to leverage people's expertise because I knew at the end of the day, I was never going to excel at them. I
Right.
knew I was just going
Right.
to be just at the very beginnings of learning how to do that thing well.
Right.
And for this project to succeed, I can't put myself in that situation. I have to put myself in the best way. I have to put myself in such a position in which um, um, I stack the deck in my favor for success. And
Okay.
there's better people who know how to do this thing than I do, or these things that I do. So I'll focus on my craft, right?
Uh-huh. So, what advice do you have for someone who wishes to do that, stack the deck in their favor, but doesn't have the nest egg to
Like the resources.
hire? Right.
Yeah. What would be the advice? If I could go back, like assume for a minute that let's go back to the thing that I originally said. Start now, right? Because don't start 5 years from now. Start now. If you could have started 5 years ago, even better. But since you can't, start right now. And
Right.
just understand that you won't be able to do everything well, right? So this goes
Mm-hmm.
back to a couple of conversations that we had previously. You have to like compartmentalize things into like nice achievable buckets
Mm-hmm.
and really ask yourself if that's the thing that you have to spend your time on right then and there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to need to dedicate your time to that thing, whatever it is that you end up choosing, whether it be like, oh, I want to build my own website, I want to build my own, whatever it is. You have to dedicate yourself into that space and sacrifice craft. You have to get
Okay.
comfortable with sacrificing craft. I'm not saying, wait, no, no, no. You have to get comfortable with the idea of sacrificing craft. And if you are comfortable with that, you can start making your choices, right? Because it is going to eat into that no matter
Well,
what.
that's what's happened with me. I've my the time I have to spend with my craft has been diminished a good bit as I build these things, but I am also building them to afford me the time to put back into my craft when
That's
they
right.
are at that point.
Yeah, that's effectively what you call your ROI, right? That's like your return on investment.
Right.
You're
Right.
you're investing in stepping away from craft, which is something that's really super comfortable to you, in order to help facilitate so you can do your craft almost exclusively moving forward, but it's not what you can do right. That's not what you have to do right now. It
Right.
makes total sense to me, like
Yeah.
in
But it's a mind fuck.
it is. It is because, somewhere along the way you're going to be like, "Oh, I wonder if I can be as good, as relevant, as efficient in drawing as I previously." I mean, and the answer could be no, but for the time being, you have to go in, you have to sort of put yourself in a space of like, where is my 24 hours going to be best used?
Yeah, and I am getting time drawing. I am. I'm just not as much. I
Yeah.
can't take on a deadline. I can't, but I can take on a cover. I can take on a painting commission. I mean, I
Sure.
am spending time with that, and in honesty, I've been able to use the time to learn more and more about painting, which is something I wanted to do, and
Oh, sure.
and has been good for me personally
Yeah.
and
Yeah. For
professionally.
me, for me personally, it's like, again, the thing that I'm into, which is like making this comic book, is my business, but also the production of this comic book can also go into the promotion of that business. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it's
Right.
convenient that it's sort of like, it can tie in very organically into each other,
Yeah.
if that
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
any sense.
Yeah. It does. It does.
Once I get the material, I'm not very good with promotional stuff. So that's when I hand it over to somebody and say, "Hey, make this into a pretty polish," because I don't have time to. That sort of action, that's sort of like,
Are you talking about
but
marketing
yeah,
people?
Yeah,
Okay.
that comes at a premium if it's
Right.
done well.
Right.
So,
Right.
but again, it's I look at it as like, well, I can't do it. You know,
Right.
so but to your question, if you don't have the kind of resources that I do, financial resources that I do, then the sacrifice is like. What I would do would be like, okay, I need to go market. I'm going to do that for like straight a month and understand what my marketing strategy is, what my end goals are based on that marketing strategy. I need to come up with like my whatever my success metric, my KPI, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
and be like, okay, so by the end of that month, by the end of those 2 months, by the end of 3 months, because I'm not drawing. Here's my expectation for that marketing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's my goal, is to like, hey, I need to market this X amount about. And honestly, I don't know of a world in which I can put down the pencil 100% just so I can go focus on marketing anyway. So I'd
Yeah.
probably come up
Okay.
with a
Yeah.
scheme that allows me to draw a little bit on the side, but primarily focus my days on marketing.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Have
This
you
is a
just?
tough this is a
Well,
tough business.
yeah. Oh,
Self-publishing,
for sure.
being your own sort of being your own sort of like entity and building out your IP is pretty freaking tough. It's and have it be a success. All of those things
Mm-hmm.
are sometimes those are like years away, years apart from each other.
Sure.
People cite Mark Miller from where he was in Civil War One to where he is now, basically writing his own checks for Netflix, or from
Mm-hmm.
Netflix or whatever. And you don't realize that it took him forever to get into that space. That
Yeah.
didn't happen immediately, and I believe that formula is unreplicatable. There's
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
Mark
Yeah. I
Miller.
think. I think
Um,
everyone's success story is unreplicatable. I think I tend to think of like everyone, like someone found a way through it, that door closes once they're through, and you've got to find your way.
yeah, but the what do you call it is still not impossible. The path there isn't impossible. It's actually the steps to get there are replicatable, right? The
Okay.
success is not, right?
Right.
So I told somebody offline that I prepare myself for success by having the materials that I need for success, right? There's a lot of people who are like, oh man, if I ever, whatever, pie in the sky thing that they're super into, dude, I can't, once I get my, whatever, my comic book in place, once I get these pages done, once I get blah, blah, blah done. And it's like, are you working on any of those things? Like you can't expect success to could just come around the corner and be like, hey, here it is. Now you can start working. And I think that people aren't comfortable with that. People aren't comfortable with sort of like not being successful for a while, or
Right.
they're happy to just kind of like dream about it as opposed to actually going to do something about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mark Millar didn't do any of that. Went the opposite. It was like, actually, I'm just going to start writing. I'm just going to like start coming up with stuff, you know? And I think in this game, you have to, and that's what I mean when I say like you have to prepare yourself for success in such a way that you have to actually generate the work that something that success can springboard from.
Right.
Some people don't know that, some people don't quite understand that formula. And that's obviously, like I said, it feels like one hat, but there's like a ton of different tiny little hats under there, which is like, it's not good enough that you come up with your own comic book and like you write and draw. You actually have to be good at drawing,
Right.
because there's plenty of art out there that exists. There's plenty of comic books out there that exist that go right down that mediocre line. That's not going to get any sort of attention. So you kind of need to polish that up a little bit. There's plenty of comic books out there that like look pretty, but they don't tell a very good, compelling story. So
Right.
you need to shore that up. So it's a lot of work to do this, and to do it at the very least, do it well enough so that you're confident at it.
Yeah, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, this
Well,
has
I
been
mean,
difficult.
yeah, it's very difficult. I think, I mean, for me, like I was that person who's always talked about, I'm going to do, I'm going to, I'm going to. The trick was, a figuring out financially how to do it,
Yeah.
but more importantly, I think B, just going for it, and
Yeah. I know often, I don't know how many times I've heard, and I'm just as guilty about it as myself, where it's like, oh, the time just isn't right for it because the money isn't there yet, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like that that will somehow just shave years off of you just doing it.
Yeah,
You
that's
know, you don't
exactly
have
what
to
it
do it
is.
like you don't have to do it all at not no not you. I'm talking about like generally. I say
Sure.
you as a point of reference, but I'm not speaking about you in specific. Like anytime I hear somebody, oh, the money isn't right, and it's like, of course it's not going to be. I don't know if there's ever going to be a situation in which money is going to be ideal, you know, or it's going to be in
Right.
the perfect
Right.
spot. It's a matter of like the money could potentially come, right? Whatever it is that you're into, even if you're not doing comics for the full time. But what you can do is plan for the idea that the money isn't right now, you know?
Right.
Which means, sure, you can't dedicate 100% of your time to it. I don't know of any situation in which you can't somehow subdivide a project, a thing that you really, really want, into more manageable pieces. If you don't know how to do it, then go learn how to do it.
Right.
You know, find a way to say, hey, this is a monumental task. I need to build this thing a little bit at a time,
Right.
right? And a little bit at a time, fast forward to 3 years, you actually have something substantial. Now, if
Yeah.
you had more, if you were in a more, if you were in a better financial situation, maybe it wouldn't take you 3 years. But that's the
Right.
limitations that you have, you know. So
Right.
it takes you
Right.
3 years. It may take you, if you had the right kind of money, put in the right sort of position, it may take you only a year and a half to do it, half as long, right?
Right.
You know, but
There's something
I
to
don't
be
know of many
said.
people who can do it.
Right. Exactly. And there's something to be said for just saying, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to figure out how to make it happen. And when you do that and put things into motion, other
Yeah.
things reveal themselves to you.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Even just that very specific mindset, and it's not to say, hey, abandon all of your financial responsibilities, because heaven forbid, I don't know what you know people are responsible for financially, and if it's like, hey, you have to like earn for your family so you can put food on the table, it'd be kind of ridiculous of me to be like, don't even think about that, just you know. I'm more like, you
Sure.
know, that's a reality that's not going to change. You
Right.
know, you need to maintain that reality so that you can continue to live, so that your family can continue to eat, whatever it is, right? But within that reality, there is this aspirational thing that you want to pull out of your back pocket someday. Okay, so if it's 30 pages worth of a comic book, let's say, and I'm oversimplifying it almost to the point where it's a cartoon, but it's like if it's a 30-page comic book, you want it done tomorrow, you can't, you know.
Right.
You have to get it done by X amount of time given your limitations, so plan
Right.
accordingly, you know.
Right. Right. That's true.
Some people don't know how to do that. They don't know how to compartmentalize a problem to make it small, you know, to make it
Right. Right.
approachable.
You're good at
Yeah,
that. I think I've
I try
learned
to.
a lot of that through you.
I try to. Yeah. There's
What
plenty,
helped
and
you?
it spreads into my you know personal life, my home life, which is like when you have a family that somehow vies for your attention all at once, all at the same time. Catch myself saying this out loud, to the point where my son mimics me now. You know, um, I go like, you know, there's something happening in the kitchen. There's something happening in the living room. There's something happening upstairs. Like I'm hearing my phone go off because it's office related work or whatever it is. You know, like all of these things are happening all at once, and they're all vying for attention. There's no like, you know, everyone assumes because, you know, my son is 3 years old, he can only his world is ever only because of him. You know, it's only ever him. He's not being selfish. It's just his mental capacity only goes into that space. You know,
Right. 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 Right.
um, and similarly, not identically, it's across all the members of my family and in the work. So they don't know that they are also competing with three other people. You know what I mean? Um, and they don't have the wherewithal to be like, oh, there's four other things or three other things happening at the same time. I'll take the place number three. You know, like, no, go prioritize that thing. You know, so I have to do that, right? And so in my head, there is this super fast, I would say like milliseconds of milliseconds calculation of me prioritizing,
Okay.
if that makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. I was
in
going to
my
ask you about
head,
prioritizing when you said that.
yeah, there's like let's say four things are happening at the same time. I look at something and I go like, okay, that can wait, that can wait, that can wait, and I'm gonna do this first, right? All things being the same, right? Let's say like, oh, you know, in that prioritization exercise, I look at it, I'm all like, that probably needs to get done right now. That probably needs to get done right now. that probably also needs to get done right now, you know?
Yeah.
Unless it's something super critical, like unless somebody is choking or something's on fire or something like that, right? But let's assume that for a second that everything is vying for my attention and doesn't care about prioritization. I have to do that, and then I get to pick. And then I say, and this is what my son mimics, I go like, okay, one thing at a time. Right? Because that's all I can ultimately really do. Unless I can toast the bread and then go clean the living room and while that bread is toasting or whatever it is. But that's a different kind of prioritization. We're talking about everything all at once, all at the same time. Mm-hmm. That means everything is the same, right? I have to pick. And again, my son says it all the time when he's like yelling for whatever it is that he's into. He knows my answer, right?
One thing at a time.
Okay, one thing at a time.
That's really awesome. That's what I mean. You are a much more level-headed person. Stress doesn't penetrate you like it does me.
Yeah, but when it does, I think it's like... And my wife, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but my wife has knows my tell, right? Because she's my wife, you know?
You told me this. I know where you're going.
When I'm stressing, she knows it. She goes like, "Are you stressed out right now?" And I said, "Why?" And she goes, "Because you're talking to yourself." Right? And I go, "I do that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I've lived with you for what feels like forever right now. And yeah, that's the thing that you do." And it's because I'm having a conversation with my calmer persona.
Okay.
I say it out loud because when I'm hearing it, I go like, "Oh, that's pretty ridiculous, isn't it?"
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's almost like I engage myself as my own sounding board. Right?
Yeah,
I can't remember the last thing I did that I was like, I now that she's brought it up, and she brought it up, what feels like years ago. But like I catch myself from time to time saying it out loud, and not only is it a reminder, or actually not only is it like this ism that I do, but it's a clear indication to me. I'm like, oh, I'm stressed out. Like when I catch myself doing it, I'm like, oh, I'm clearly stressed out about this. And then it allows me to step back. So it's not enough for me to be like, oh, I'm stressed out. That's kind of funny. Haha. Like I hear myself doing it. I see myself doing it. And then I take a step back and I go like, why am I so stressed out about that?
Right.
What does that mean for me right now? Is it because it's really important? And then I go through the process. I go through is it something that I can do something about? Or is it something that I just kind of need to find a way to let go because I can't do something about it right now? If at all, right?
Smart.
And if the answer is like, I can't do anything about it right now, and can I do something about it? And as soon as that sort of like game plan version of myself kicks in, it brings me an enormous amount of comfort.
Okay.
To be like, oh, I got a plan for that. I think it could work if it goes like this. And the only issue that I have is I often have a hard, my memory retention is so awful. So I know my process. Like, oh, I came up with that game plan. I need to email myself.
So
I literally need to
email as your reminder system?
Yeah, because it's a way to keep myself accountable to this game plan that I came up with, or else I'll wake up in the morning, or should I wake up in the morning feeling that level of anxiety and stress, I'll see it on my phone. I'm like, oh, right, I meant to address that by doing this.
Yeah, I use my calendar. That's what I use,
Yeah, it's a saving grace for me. And it's easy enough for me to take a look at that thing that I typed out to myself and transfer it onto my calendar with copy and paste. But yeah, I can't. And whenever I stress out, my wife is like, "Are you stressed out?" Because you're like talking to yourself again. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I really do." Even when I'm in it's a version of it. It's not 100% one-to-one. When I'm in the gym, right, and I'm looking at that weight that I have to move.
Right.
You know what I mean? When I'm looking at that weight, then I'm like, "Geez, I've never lifted that before."
Right.
I talk to myself.
Yeah, I do that.
I'm talking myself through the process of like, okay, I know this is a big weight, right? Like I know this is like, this is like a percentage way above my 1 rep max or whatever it is, So what am I paying attention to right now? I'm not paying attention to the weight. I'm paying attention to how to move this weight, right? So I'm doing this. I'm talking to myself. Okay, Right. I have to be like heels down, make sure, you know what I mean? Like I'm getting
Right.
my breathing in, just get it out of the cup and then back away from it. And, don't forget this is the breathing process and blah, 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 blah. And then it stops becoming about the weight. It starts to becoming about the problem solving, how to move that weight.
Right. That's good. That's a good
Yeah.
realization. I'd say in the gym, I've learned to turn the thoughts off.
Huh. Interesting.
To like, if I think about this, I'm not going to do it. It's like with my cold soaks last year. I learned
Mm.
very much to turn my thoughts off. I learned to stop thinking about what I'm about to do. I learned to stop
Mm.
asking myself about what I'm about to do. I
Mm.
had this, I made a deal with myself before I even got to the gym that I was going
Mm.
to put on a bathing suit. And in
Mm.
February, I'm just going to go out there, set my timer, and hop in.
Mm.
And so I was able to turn off everything because I had already decided that's what I was going to do. So I was
Oh,
just
sure.
going to do it. And I
Sure.
didn't let doubt in. I didn't let fear in. And if they crept in a little bit, I was like, well, I did this yesterday. And it shut it up
Right.
immediately.
Right. But that to
Yeah.
me, it sounds like you've found sort of like this process, these mechanisms that allow you to like, let's get through this, right? It's like this
Yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
survival in the moment mechanism. Yeah, I think that's one of our curses as human beings is our ability to look back into our past or project into the future, and we are never
Right.
sort of like in the moment, So
Right. That's exactly
thinking
right.
back into, I can't remember who said it, but they said it significantly more elegant than I'm about to. But like thinking too much about your past brings about depression. Thinking too much about your future brings about
Anxiety.
anxiety,
Yeah.
right?
That's a famous idea. And it's
I
true.
try not to like inhabit, especially when I'm in a situation where I know it could potentially bring in anxiety. I try not to do too much of that, right? And I think my wife is very keen to say, um, first of all, she's like, "Isn't your head noisy all the time? Like, isn't it loud in your head all the time?" And I go, "Oh my gosh, I don't know. Is it loud in your head?" And she's like, "All the time."
Is it loud in your head or no?
No. Like, it's rare when something is when a thought or a worry is so overwhelming that it gets super loud in my head. It's like a stupid person in my head. It is so dumb in my brain that before you and I got on this call, all I was paying attention to was like, what did I mean to draw there? You know,
Right.
um,
Right.
what did I
You know how
what
to
did
be in the
I
moment.
yeah, what did I mean to like? Oh, that doesn't look right, or so, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Well, I
rare.
mean,
Is I'm not thinking outside this door when I'm in here.
that's what I'm
You
learning
know?
to do. I
Yeah.
mean, I would say, yeah, I lived in a very loud, I had a lot of stuff in the head that was very loud at all times.
Yeah.
And I'm learning now to not be that way.
Yeah, and let me bring in my wife, an example that we just talked about 2 nights ago, in regards to her, and her sort of like her attitude towards her art. So you want to talk about like loud in your head, by not letting but like being quiet in your head and not letting the outside stuff, sort of like influence you while you're drawing. But what if the actual physical art of your drawing is the thing that gives you the most anxiety? And we were talking about that the other night, and she said, and so my wife is one of those people who are like has a ton of different interests, from like sewing to like crocheting to like growing plants to everything else. And whatever that she's into, she'll get into 100%. She'll do the research, she'll buy books, she'll read articles, she'll listen to YouTube, the whole bit. And then she'll go try it, the thing that she's into, whether it be like she was into bookmaking, into sculpting, and she'll try it, get frustrated that it's not exactly her, it doesn't meet up to expectation,
Mm-hmm.
and then like, put it down and just come back to it the next day and then get better at it and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she has a really great, for the lack of a better term, like she's got a really great forgiveness mechanism for like not excelling at that thing, right? Except for art.
Oh, really?
Like that muscle that she engages when she doesn't crochet something correctly or when she doesn't like, stitch something correctly or sew something or plant something and the plant died, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
like she can forgive herself very easily for that. But when it comes to her own body of work, when she's drawing, she has this, what we determine to be like this trauma of not being able to like forgive herself because it's not exactly what she thought of in her head. And she's like, do you ever go through that? And I go like, no, because I never look at the exercise of drawing, the physical act of drawing, as something that I need to like, conquer. You know what I mean? Like I'm in a constant mode of like getting better. And if I happen to find something that I'm like, oh, I didn't do that last time, that's delightful to me. But to her, it's the other way. She thinks of things as like, I need to be good at this already because, and I think in part, I got to the core of it, which is because this is her. Art is her. This is the thing that she absolutely loves. That all of those other things are just like hobbies that she does.
Right. Right.
But when it comes to art, it's part of her DNA. And the idea that she isn't as good as she could be is traumatizing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Imagine,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like, Michael Jordan playing golf. Yeah, okay, he can be good at golf. Who really is good at golf? But like, like you can be good at golf or you can be awful at golf. But at the end of the day, it's the pastime that you do. But when it
Right.
comes to basketball, he's going to be really, really good at it.
Right.
The idea of not being good at it or having an off game, having an off week, having an off season is like, like crippling. And I think
And you
that's
don't
what,
have that
of not being good.
of the idea of not performing well as an artist being crippling.
Yeah, I don't have that. Not because I believe myself to always being in a good, like as like, not because I believe that my art is going to be good no matter what, but because I never set that expectation for myself.
Right. Right.
Right? We can look at it under that very specific set of rules. If we just put everything into that bucket, then yeah, it becomes really super stressful. It starts to become about like, why isn't this as good? And shouldn't I be better by now? I've been working in this industry for years. All of those things start to compound on top. It's like these like, heavy pieces of luggage filled with like bricks.
Right.
I can
Right.
start putting that onto my back, but instead I go like, how do I think of it as like, I just need to. I know I'm not that good. I know I'm not. Right? I believe in it. There's always spaces that I can get better at. So
Right.
instead of focusing on I'm not that good and why shouldn't I know this by now? Instead, because I know I'm not that good, I relieve myself of that pressure. Instead, I go like, well, what can I get good at?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't compound it by like years of experience and being in this workforce, and that guy over there has already accomplished as much as I would like to have. I just heard it again, where it's like comparison is like the theft of joy or some shit like
Right.
that, right?
Right. Right. All right.
I
Well.
don't. I take away all of those anxieties that somebody else has built. It like external forces could potentially built onto me, and say
Right.
like, okay, I know I'm not that good, right? Like, but so what is it that I'm not good at, and how can I go do something about it?
Okay.
And that actionable, like the making things actionable, brings me great comfort.
Yeah. That's a healthy way of being. Well, then let me paint a picture or a scenario for you.
Yeah,
You get handed a sketchbook to do a commission in.
yeah,
There's like 3 or 4 artists in it before you,
sure,
and there are 3 or 4 artists you hold in very high regard. Let's say
yeah,
Claire
yeah,
Wendling, Ashley Wood.
sure.
Does that
Dan
mentality,
Panosian.
does that mentality maintain, or do you at that point start to break and feel some of those anxieties?
No, 0%.
Okay.
I've been in those situations.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you have. I'm sure you
I've
have.
seen these sketchbooks that is like, geez, Louise, this is an expensive
So
sketchbook.
what do you say? So what do you say to yourself? I'm just gonna do what I do and not worry
I
about what they do.
I I set up expectations based on my craft and my level.
Okay.
Right? I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like I am asked to this. Um, First of all, I assure myself that clearly this person who asked me to draw in this sketchbook thinks that I'm warranted to draw in this sketchbook, and that means something to me.
Sure, it does.
In a sketchbook of like all of those exemplary people, somebody
you just
goes
need
like,
to do you. That's what you say.
I am just focused on how I can make myself better, not by a metric that somebody else establishes for me, which sometimes can become insurmountable, even though they may be true, right? I need to do that. I need to do that for myself, and then re-register later on to be like, oh, did I accomplish that? Okay, so what else is there?
Right.
Those I've been put in those situations. I'm like, I just remember there, Adam Hughes in the convention circuit is just pumping out stuff that's just that shouldn't be. That has no business being in a sketch. That's a fully rendered thing that's ready for a cover.
Right.
And this sketchbook was pretty dense as far as like the people who have drawn in it. Like you flip and there's a Mignola, you flip there's an Adam Hughes, you flip there's a Bruce Timm, you flip there's a Kevin Nolan, and it's not the versions of those people's drawings that are just like the throwaway $50 versions. You can tell that the person who owned that sketchbook had like paid premium dollar to have those people render the hell out of something. I remember that Bruce Timm drawing, and I was like, "Jeez, Louise, Bruce rarely does this for people, So this must have cost this guy a pretty penny, and caught Bruce, and like in a day where he was a bit more sociable than he typically is,
Right.
So it can get pretty overwhelming to think of it in that context. But I was just like, I'm glad that this person thought that I was, it was ideal for me to participate in this sketchbook. So, but that should give me enough confidence to be like, I'll just do what I do. I'll just, who knows if it'll be as good as those people, but that's not the metric that I put up.
And that's subjective anyway.
Yeah, I just go like, I think I can do this. I think this is what they're asking of me.
Right.
And that level of realization, that's more difficult for me actually to think about, like, because there's so many things that I think people, I think there's a handful of things that so many people are drawn to with my work. It's hard to parse which ones of my pieces that they go like, oh, I really like it when you draw those like really super personal, quiet moments when you do your ballpoint pen and you draw like, this lovely scene, this really emotional scene between a guy and a girl, or do you like it, or I really like that thing where you like push proportions and angles and blah 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 blah, right? That's really oftentimes that's the tough spot that I get in, because if that person is paying me a premium, I would prefer that they get from me that expectation,
Sure. That's a healthy way to be.
Yeah. It doesn't always work, but like I said, that's the reason why I take a position of just being as dumb as possible all the time. My life just becomes significantly easier.
I think I'm going to do that. I like the sound of it. I do. It sounds good to me.
Yeah, man.
It just it sounds like a happier way to be.
Yeah. I know that's oversimplifying. I know there's a clearly it's oversimplifying. Rare am I just walking around with like a goofy smile on my face, just slamming into things, But I often look at how overly stressful situations can be, and I don't know if you do this, right? I don't know what sort of processes that you think about, but I look at things and I go like, is the stress that's involved with that self-imposed?
Yeah.
Right? Do I put a value on that thing when it comes to like a stress level? Do I put a point of stress into that thing?
Yeah, I
if
do.
The answer is like yes,
I do.
Then I go like, okay, then I'll step away from that, or I'll try to de-stress about it. Or is the even worse is, am I putting a high value in that because somebody else did? And I haven't classified it for myself whether or not I find that thing valuable. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Like, I try not to look at something and be like, I value that too because somebody else values it. Okay. That's kind of, what a massive waste of time. Unless it's true. Unless it's like, oh, they like it, it's important to them, and I like it and it's important to me. But sometimes people just make the leap because they're not thinking for themselves. It is also important to me only because it's important to somebody else.
Right.
Right? Social media is like 70% of social media is built that way. You know, like
Right.
this person who I hold in high regard, it's weird to me, right? Because again, it's like, where does your critical and free thinking go, right? Like, you know, somebody says this social issue is important. This issue on the internet is important right now. And you're like, that sounds important. But in order for me to put that onto myself, I actually have to go and read about it. You know what I
Like
mean? And be
what?
like, why is that important? You know, like why?
For example, like what?
Mm, this is overly political, so I'm not going to get into it all that much. Like the war in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
right? And people started putting the Ukrainian flag in their bios or whatever the hell it is.
Right.
Again, it's like
Right.
Twitter activism is like the easiest shit in the world, you know?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm all like, oh, that sounds awful. You know, that's clearly not. That's clearly what feels like to on the very obvious basis a clear violation of like what it means to have freedom and human rights. But I'm gonna go read into that a little bit more, right?
Uh-huh.
And even if I arrive at the same place as everyone else, I'm just not taking it on at face value, which bugs the heck out of me with some people. Because if I were to ask you something more in depth about that subject matter that you're really super into, and you can't tell me more about it other than, oh, it's because of this, you know?
Right.
I'm like, that's really dumb.
Right. That's true.
You somehow
But
as
you've
a
just
society,
dismantled the entire social media shit. Nobody's an expert on anything, but they speak as
there
if they
are some though, you know, there are some
There are
people
some.
who are in those spaces where I would like to know more about it based on their perspective, and then based on that, right, multiple perspectives actually, like, hey, I am pro this, I am anti that. Okay, great, let me read both sides of it and decide for myself rather than knee jerk into the collective thinking, which is like, that's bad because so and so said so, because this influencer said so, you know, like
Right.
you know, there's going to be things that's going to bias my opinion. That's natural. If a friend of mine says it and I know that friend's taste, something as trivial as like, oh, that movie is really bad, you know, and I know based on our conversations that she and I have a similar taste in movies, similar taste in like books or whatever it is. I'd be like, oh, they think it's bad. It probably is pretty awful. But it's not going to stop me from listening to that thing or watching that thing and decide for myself. Right? So similar, like, and that's somehow more acceptable. That concept is more acceptable than, you know, that sort of like learning it out, you know, figuring it out for yourself. That's somehow more acceptable in like music and art and blah, blah, blah than it is with politics. Nobody ever wants to delve into, did they really say that?
Right.
Like, that's a take for sure. That's what, you know, if you read between, or if you sort of like, that's an interpretation for sure. But you go listen to that thing, please, you know, on your own and see whether or not that's your takeaway, knowing full well there's probably going to be a bias built in.
That's what I do. My kids get so annoyed with me whenever they're like, did you hear this and that? I'm like, where'd you hear that?
Yeah.
They're like, well, it was on Instagram. I'm like, well, are you sure it's true? And they're like, you're always questioning me. I'm like, well, did you question that? No, let's look it up.
Yes. Oh, I mean, I think that's amazing parenting. That's gold star for parenting. Not because you're challenging them, but because you're instilling them with a level of inquisitiveness that's going to serve them well long term.
I hope.
You know, there's plenty of things that I took at face value because as a society coming from the Philippines, it just was the way you thought about things, you know? Only until I came to the United States to the, you know, stress of my mother that I started asking things, you know, like, why is it that way? You know, why do we think of things that way? I hope that's something that I can pass on to my kid, you know? Not because I want him to deconstruct everything, but I just want him to have I just want him to have the answers that he feels comfortable with and still maintain some level of like, you know, unity within our family, but certainly ask questions, right? Don't ever sidestep from that, because there is a there is an active population fueled by social media that just loves it when you don't question anything,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
right? And so you want to talk about like bringing stress onto yourself. Like what you're basically doing is like, hey, you know that person's baggage, right? I'm gonna take that on 100%, because like without even like doing anything about like what the hell is in this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna start
absolutely.
towing the bags for them. You know,
That's the
and that's for
internet.
everything.
Yeah.
You know, like I try to think about that kind of stuff, and yeah, sure. 70% of the time, I land in the same place that somebody else had said. It's like that's a bad thing, right? I'm all like, it sounds bad, and then I'll go read up about it.
Sounds.
You know, I'll read about it. I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's absolutely awful. You know, and
Yeah.
then at the very least, I came to that opinion without having it be spoon fed to me. You know,
Right. Right.
and I think that that goes a lot for what we were talking about originally, when it comes to like getting better at my craft. Rare do I look at somebody else's stuff and be like, yo, I should be at that level already.
Right.
You
Right.
know, I
Do you look at?
never.
Do you see other pieces of artwork that inspire you to try something new or different to learn from?
Oh yeah, man, all the freaking time, you know. And I know the feeling, and it's rare that I go off of that, but like I know the feeling that I get whenever I see something, and I'm like, I'm gonna freaking try that,
Yeah, it's
you know.
exciting. It's inspiring. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not
it's that
paralyzing.
thing that often we lose track of because the older we get, the more cynical we've become. But man, I try to keep myself open to as much of that as possible. You
Yeah, I'm
know?
filled with that. All day,
Yeah,
like Instagram is that for me. I'm
yeah,
constantly like,
absolutely,
ooh, I want to try that. I want to learn that. Whereas it
absolutely,
used
and
to
that's
be
where.
like you're saying, it used to be like always judging my work against it. Now it's like,
Yeah,
oh no, that's here to teach me more. So
yeah,
I get excited about that now.
yeah, yeah, and I see a lot of people. Well, I more than a handful of comments in the past collectively, where it's like, I drew the same exact thing, but after seeing yours, I want to quit. I'm like, why?
Yeah,
why would you? Why would you, after seeing mine and we drew the same thing, and clearly something about mine made you go like, "Whoa, that is so good." Why would you want to quit? What that says to me whenever I draw something like, let's say dinosaurs, like, which I love drawing dinosaurs, and I'm really bad at it because I don't know like dinosaur anatomy. I don't know like dinosaur skin. I don't even know
yeah,
at this point. I'm so bound by my reference. I don't know where to start taking liberties. You know?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Louis LaRosa knows his dinosaurs.
Absolutely. Like, so when I see people who know what they're doing draw that kind of stuff, I'm like, holy crap, I drew a dinosaur. And they didn't, they drew it so much better than me. Actually, what they did is problem solve a lot of the things for me.
Right,
I look
right,
at the thing and I'm like, oh, God, that's how they interpret that. Why do they interpret it that way? Oh, that was
right.
their solve for that particular like wingspan, or how they're translating that thing from the photo reference, or whatever it is,
Klaus dropped a knowledge bomb on me over dinner. Well, it wasn't even to me; it was to my son,
Yeah.
who had asked, like, "What do you think about artists who copy other people's styles?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And
What do you
and
say?
and Klaus was like, yeah, I mean, when you get Klaus the teacher to speak, it just
Sure.
open your mind because knowledge
Yeah.
is coming.
Yeah,
He
dude.
said he said our style is built and based upon our personal problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
So to copy someone else's problem solving makes drawing more difficult for you and makes the end result not genuine for you. And
Shit.
that
That's
learning
profound.
to embrace your means of problem solving is the key to success for your own artwork.
Sure.
And it just like,
Was he
and
speaking like one level above what your son was asking though?
no, 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 no,
Okay.
no, dude, no, yeah, my son's a pretty, pretty advanced artist, but also Klaus just has a way of speaking that it applies to anyone listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I've come to a very good place with the way I draw over the past few years, and have come to really em- enjoy and embrace the way I draw things as
Mm-hmm.
mine. And
Mm-hmm.
hearing that was like, oh man, it just made me want to lean into it even more. Like,
Sure.
I draw very geometrically because that's how my mind solves that problem. By
Right.
breaking it into geometric shapes, it makes
Sure.
sense to me. If
Sure.
I were to draw more um, curvy and organic, like a Bill Sienkiewicz, or just loose
Mm-hmm.
sketchiness, whenever I've tried that, it doesn't work for me. And that was like, that's why, because that's not
Right.
how I solve problems.
Right. Right.
It's pretty profound
That's
for me.
fascinating. Yeah. And this is the same guy that in our previous conversation students were pushing back on because
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
clearly he doesn't know what he's doing. Clearly
Oh yeah,
he
I have
can't. He's
no
never
idea.
mentored before and taught before.
Right, right.
Yeah, those are that's a pretty amazing concept. That's a pretty
Yeah,
amazing concept that style develops because it's your. Oh gosh, I'm gonna have to pay him a nickel every time I use that from now on. But like
I
style
know. I'm
develops
gonna use it
because
all
it's
the
like
time.
it's your way. You develop that style based on your way of solving problems. And I don't know how you can capture it any better than that. Because
No,
anytime I
I've
have a
never heard
conversation
it.
about style, with somebody, they always like, how did you develop your own style? I'm like, I never thought about it in that context before.
Right.
Or like, oh, that's just my problem solving sense. I often defer to like, oh, it's because I saw it from X, Y, and Z, and that's how that's who I took it from. But ultimately, if you take a step back from that, that also speaks to, well, they solved the problem for me, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's why I took that on, right? Because it was a problem solving concept. I didn't know how to solve for core
Right.
shadowing.
Oh
I saw it
shit.
on that
Yes.
person. I
Yes.
took it and I was like, oh, but why did that make sense to you? Oh, because it solved the problem that I didn't even know how to ask, which is like, how did they do that core shadow?
You're absolute. That's it. That's it. That's fucking
Yeah,
brilliant too.
yeah.
All
That's
right.
a positive note. We're shy
Yeah,
in
we
10
should
minutes, but I think that's pretty
and
good.
yeah. Well, we anywhere between 50 and an hour is usually where we
All
go.
right, sounds good. We'll do that.
All right. Oh,
All right,
one question before we end.
go.
Do you want to record in person in Seattle with Mateo, you and me in the room?
That'd be fun,
Yeah,
I
I think
think.
so too.
Yeah,
I'll
let's
bring
do
the
it with our masks on though, and 6 feet apart from each other because.
dude. We can Zoom. We'll all get our own room and we'll
Mm-hmm.
Zoom in.
Yeah, I don't know where Mateo has been. I want to social distance from that guy so
He's
hard.
a filthy animal, anyway.
Yeah,
So
I want to wear an N95 mask on my ears. I just don't want him anywhere near my holes.
just wear it on your dick. Just wear it on your dick.
All right, that's it.
All right.